Okay, I'm going to call on the mover of motion number 9, Stormont House Agreement, NIPSA.
Okay, Alison Miller on behalf of NIPSA to move motion number 9. Conference, while NIPSA had for a long time warned of the devastating impact of the backloading of the cuts contained within the 4-year comprehensive spending review, it came as a shock to many to fully realise what this would mean for jobs and public services. When the 2015-16 budget was published, it became a stark reality what the implications for our public services and public service jobs would be. It is a reality that if implemented, our public services will never be the same again. On top of this, we have a situation whereby tomorrow George Osborne will deliver his 8th of July budget, which will see further cuts to the Northern Ireland Block Grant and further devastating cuts to hard-working families by cuts to working families' tax credits, child tax credits, to somewhere in the tune of £12 billion. In addition, it is expected that this budget will see further attacks on the sick and the disabled by further attacks on unemployment support allowance, reducing it to the level of job seekers allowance. Conference, we condemn the Northern Ireland Executive Parties for the financial elements of the Stormont House Agreement, which will ultimately see 20,000 public sector jobs lost, not just now, but for future generations, and with it a further 6,000 to 10,000 jobs lost from the private sector. This will devastate the public services and will devastate the communities in which we live, who rely on the services delivered by many of our members. Conference, the financial elements of the Stormont House Agreement are ludicrous, with the Northern Ireland Executive borrowing over £700 million over the next 4 years to effectively make public servants redundant. This will have to be repaid, and in the end, we will be poorer as a result, with less public services that we all rely on our day-to-day lives disappearing. We already have witnessed street lightings not being replaced, grass cutting only being done once a year, school teachers and support staff being made redundant, and I could go on and on. Conference, there is an onslaught on public services, public service jobs, and the Stormont House Agreement also seeks to press forward with the key sell-off of public service assets, such as TransLink, Belfast Harbour and Northern Ireland Water. It is vital that if the politicians come after our public services, then we must go after them and seek to use all the weapons at our disposal to defend our public services and our public service jobs. Conference, we have witnessed already the impacts of creeping privatisation in many areas of our public services, such as health. What does this actually mean in reality? The staff are generally paid less and have lesser terms and conditions, and the poor with no pensions. It is often claimed that the private sector can deliver public services better. What rubbish! Where is the evidence for this? They may deliver the services cheaper, although I would say that is highly questionable, but where they do this is at the expense of the workers delivering the service, who are often on minimum wage and low-paid jobs. The private sector is therefore making a profit. They are not doing it because they believe in the public sector. They are seeking to make a fast buck off the back of the sick, the vulnerable, our children, our elderly, and they must not be allowed to do it in our name. Conference, there's also the issue of corporation tax, which many in the private sector and our political masters believing that this will somehow bring inward investment to Northern Ireland and grow the private sector. This is despite the growing bank of evidence that the corporation tax will not grow the private sector, but it will further deplete the public sector by somewhere between 300 million and 600 million, depending on who you listen to. However, if we look at this part of the island of Ireland, where is the evidence that the lower rate of corporation tax has created additional jobs or attracted one piece of foreign direct investment? What it has created is many more plaques on the doors of empty offices, and this has been used as a tax haven for unscrupulous companies. Conference, there's an onslaught on our public services, which will need an effective and strong campaign to build our opposition. And while the public sector strikes involving 5 unions on the 13th of March was an important day, it was only the start. Conference, I would call on ICTU to reinvigorate an effective public service defence campaign so that in the future years we will have public service to be proud of, to hand over to our children, our grandchildren and further generations. Conference, I move.
Thank you, Alison. Is there a second for the motion? Thank you. Speaking? Yeah. No.
Padraig Mahal, Nipsa, second motion number 9. First of all, I was wondering, was Jennifer still in the hall? It's a pity. I was going to say, Jennifer, will you please stop implementing the cuts? Conference, we need to be clear in this hall. Not one of the fundamental issues affecting Northern Ireland or this island has been resolved. The national question remains unresolved. Sectarianism remains right. And repression continues to haunt us daily in Northern Ireland. We are a society in a political crisis. We are a society that has been failed by the politicians and by the political institutions that tend towards reinforcing sectarianism rather than resolving it. And to then, comrades, take that crisis and heap austerity on top of it is madness. To then heap on top of austerity some local growing additional austerity through a cut in corporation tax is absolute madness. And when you apply madness to a political situation, there is a price to be paid. That price comes in lost jobs, destruction of education services, no homes, a health crisis, services run into the ground, and the collapse even of the private sector. But comrades, on top of that price, there is another one. It is the price of a future of violence and conflict, because we should have no doubt about it. When the Tories and the Northern Ireland Assembly and the Dáil implement austerity in this island, they throw fuel onto the fire of conflict. They add to the potential for conflict. They tell a generation there is no way out. They tell a generation there is no future, and young people turn to old, tried and tested and failed methods. They try the bullet and the bomb again. So comrades, we have to find an alternative. We have to present something else. What we have to say is build the peace, stop the cuts, give young people a future, and fight back against austerity. Support the motion.
Thank you. Other speakers? I just asked all speakers just to be conscious of the time. We are running a little bit behind time, so when the red light goes on, you're finished. Okay.
Okay, thanks very much. Mark Walsh, ASTI Executive. I just wanted to speak on this because it reminds me very much, the figures even are very reminiscent of what happened in the South. If you think of, it says here in the motion that 20 to 30,000 public servants are due to be let go in Northern Ireland or made redundant. The same figures actually happened in the South. 30,800 people were gotten rid of from the public sector. 320,400 down to 289,600. That's a reduction of 10% in the public sector figures. Also, the pay bill, the so-called pay bill, as if it's a bill given to somebody that they don't like for public sector workers, has been reduced by 20% since 2009, from 17.5 billion in 2009 to 13.9 billion now. And the shocking fact is, and I know people from our comrades from the north here are appealing for support, but the shocking fact is that those reductions, 10% in numbers and 20% in pay, have been achieved in the South with the cooperation of the trade unions within ICTU, with the cooperation of ICTU. Not with the opposition, with the cooperation and participation of ICTU unions. How? Through Croke Park 1, Haddington Road, and it rolls on now into the Lansdowne Road agreement. That is what ICTU and the unions within ICTU who are in favour of all these deals are doing to the public sector. They're helping to cut pay and cut numbers. And I just want to say to delegates from the north that if you're appealing to ICTU in the south to help you, beware what you're asking for, because you may be told to go in and negotiate some agreement with the Northern Ireland Executive to cut voluntarily rather than have it imposed on you. to volunteer to cut it yourself. So just beware what you ask for. I clearly support people who want to fight back in the north, but just beware of asking for help. Thanks.
Thanks, Mark. Any more speakers on motion 9? No more speakers.